On April 8th, 1983, people turned on their television sets to see something that they knew to be impossible. What happened that night is generally considered to be one of the greatest magic tricks ever performed. David Copperfield was to make the Statue of Liberty disappear. And that's exactly what he did, or at least it seemed that way. And luckily, this legendary illusion was both televised and highly publicized, which means there's plenty of footage of it still around that you can watch. If you look up David Copperfield Statue of Liberty on YouTube, the first video that comes up is a montage a couple minutes long of some footage from the night that gives an overview of what happened. It sits at 1.4 million views. The second is an uncut 10-minute section of the broadcast which has 5.1 million views, although sadly it ends before the illusion is finished. But neither of those videos are what I find fascinating about this trick. The video I'm more interested in is the third video that comes up. It's called How Did David Copperfield Make the Statue of Liberty Disappear? Explained. And it isn't clickbait. The video is a 2.5-minute summary of how the trick was done. It's crudely drawn and the audio quality leaves something to be desired, but it's a good video, especially for 2014, the year it was uploaded. It's clear, concise, and to the point. It has 2.2 million views and a horrendous dislike ratio.
Ho, 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 it's magic, you know. Never believe it's not so. It's
This is part one. So, some time ago, I was watching Christopher Nolan's 2009 film, The Prestige. The film is about two rival magicians, played by Christian Bale and Hugh Jackman, who compete with each other to try to have the better trick and eventually are both driven insane.
Ladies and gentlemen, the remarkable Rowley and Greg the Great. That should have been me.
Like most of Nolan's work, it is a mixed bag. While it's captivating to watch and anchored by two very strong performances, it also goes into weird, out-of-place territory, the dialogue is predictably bad, and it has that unfortunate 2D woman trope that Nolan makes a habit of using. But despite its flaws, we were getting to the end of the movie, and I was prepared to call it Christopher Nolan's best work. But the movie had still one more question to answer. Christian Bale's character does this teleportation trick that Hugh Jackman and us as the audience don't quite figure out how he can possibly do. Usually this kind of trick is done with a double.
He uses a double. No, it's a double. He doesn't use a double. A bloody good double.
But we see Christian Bale close up on both ends of it. It's clearly him. And just towards the end of the film, Christopher Nolan reveals how he does the trick in the movie's central twist. Christian Bale has an identical twin brother. At this moment, I audibly said fuck you, and the movie instantly plummeted from a solid 4 out of 5 to a generous 2, doomed to the company of Tenet and The Dark Knight Rises rather than Memento. But the movie ends with a monologue from Michael Caine that made me question everything I thought about this movie and is still haunting me a bit to this day. He monologues essentially to the audience, ending with the line, "You don't really want to know. You want to be fooled." My two favorite magicians are Penn Jillette and Raymond Joseph Teller, better known as simply Penn and Teller. They have this great comedy educational style of magic that really appeals to me, although I've never seen them live and I'm sure it's a very different experience. In a tech support interview with Wired, Jillette comments on the supposed magicians never reveal their secrets rule. He says that, of course, in some contexts, magicians do reveal their secrets, but the reason that the rule is sort of in place is that, as he puts it, the illusion crumbles if the audience were to find out how a trick is done. And you might think that a truly great magic trick should be able to be explained and still admired and enjoyed. But unfortunately, that isn't really true, and the reason for that is pretty simple.
magic isn't real, you idiot. Read a book. Magic isn't real, you idiot. Read a book. Magic isn't real.
Or is it?
It gives me no joy to admit this, but magic is, in fact, not real. I don't know about any of you, but the fact that magic isn't real is genuinely really sad to me. I struggled to even type out the words in the previous paragraph because if I admit that magic isn't real, That's honestly kind of depressing. And the role of magicians is both to create and satisfy this itch. On one hand, we wouldn't know to want magic to exist in the first place if they didn't constantly show us how cool it would be. But on the other hand, once they've planted that idea into their heads, they're sort of the only way we can scratch that itch, the only way we can believe again. They allow us some kind of hope by saying, hey, maybe there really is magic. Watch this. And the reality is that humans just really aren't that smart. We're smart enough to destroy our planet, sure, but not quite smart enough to figure out sleight of hand or any of the other illusory techniques magicians tend to use. When I watch Penn and Teller perform a trick, I know somewhere in my head that it isn't real, but my brain can't figure out why it's definitely fake. So I'm forced to arrive at the conclusion that it could be real. To watch a magic trick performed well is to briefly fool your brain into thinking that magic does exist, and a world in which magic exists is 100 times brighter and more fun than the one we really live in. And so you allow yourself to believe that maybe the Statue of Liberty really did vanish. The problem is, that feeling is not stable. When we come to the conclusion that what we just saw might be magic, we have this strong urge to figure out whether it actually was. Which is why we ask the magician, how do you do that? It's the reason that that explanation video has 2.2 million views in the first place. And whether we realize it or not, when we ask that question, we want the answer to be, it actually was magic. But that's never the answer. The answer is never magic, because magic does not and cannot and will never exist. And the disappointment that comes with that feeling is the reason that video has such a bad dislike ratio. Somehow the answer feels fake or cheap. And these are the words that come to mind whenever I find out how a trick was done by anyone. No matter how clever or impressive the solution is, it always feels like the magician was cheating. I always feel, pardon the pun, disillusioned. But there is no trick whose method doesn't feel cheap upon discovery. The only good answer to how do you do that is, it was really magic. But that's never the answer. The answer is always, he rotated the stage they were sitting on away from the Statue of Liberty. They were literally looking away from it. And when I find that out, all I can think is, well, that's dumb. And that's the same thing I thought during the big reveal in The Prestige. It wasn't that it didn't make sense, it was that it was stupid. And it was stupid. I mean, identical twin brothers? Come on. One of the foremost video essayists on YouTube, the Nerdwriter, has an excellent video in which he likens The Prestige in structure to a magic trick. And I agree with his thesis, even if I don't necessarily share the same enthusiasm for the film on the whole. If The Prestige is a magic trick, then the reveal is the magician telling you how it was done after the show. And the feeling of disappointment and frustration during that twist is identical to how it feels to watch that video on the Statue of Liberty. It ruins the trick, which is to say, it ruins the movie. And it's fairly clear that the movie is aware of this. Michael Caine ends the movie with the line, "You want to be fooled," and he's absolutely right. I felt that the movie would have been infinitely better if they had just not told me how Christian Bale did the trick, allowed me to think that there was some possibility it was really magic. Hugh Jackman goes insane trying to figure out how Christian Bale does his trick, and he never does. But I do. And when I did, my disappointment was titanic. It is perhaps a cautionary tale about asking questions you don't want the answer to. Either you'll never find out, like Hugh Jackman, or you'll wish you never found out, like me. So where does that leave The Prestige? It's a fact I've wrestled with quite a bit at this point. On one hand, there's no denying that the twist ruined the movie for me. But on the other hand, the fact that the twist ruins the movie is kind of perfect. It might even be the smartest choice in Nolan's entire filmography. I've long been a believer that art being unpleasant does not mean it can't be admired or even enjoyed in some way. Raw, a film I discussed in an earlier essay, is highly unpleasant. But it's from that unpleasantness that it derives its incredible power, and by the end of it, leaves me deeply satisfied with the experience. But The Prestige is different, because the manner in which it's unpleasant intentionally strips the movie of its power and my sense of satisfaction. And unfortunately for Chris Nolan, satisfaction might just be the defining feature of what makes a movie good to any of us, or at least to me. Sadness, anger, stupidity, even boredom, they can all be tolerated if at the end of the day, I feel like my time was well spent. The Prestige is the opposite of this. A highly pleasant, intelligent experience that at the last moment makes me feel that I've wasted my time. So if I were to be asked if I consider The Prestige to be a good movie, my answer would mostly be a philosophical one. In my earlier video about The Room, I asserted that it doesn't really matter why The Room is so funny, whether it's intentional or not. It's a good comedy regardless. And if I want to be consistent, and I do, I still stand by that opinion, it has to go the other way as well. The twist in The Prestige is, in my opinion, a work of genius. But just as Tommy Wiseau's stupidity didn't damn The Room, Nolan's brilliance doesn't save The Prestige either. The Prestige sucks in the coolest, best, most brilliant possible way. But it still sucks.
You wouldn't know it from the suit. You ruined my fucking life!
Never been away, never seen a day.